DeMeco Ryans against his peers, the difference between a breakout candidate and someone fighting for their football life, and some other things that Nick Caserio had to say. Let's go inside the locker room on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
We'll do it live.
Yeah. It's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, locker room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localize every time, can't stop, won't stop.
Happy Tuesday to all. It is the locker room, number one source for Texans digital content. DeMeco Ryans, does he have any peers? Is anyone even close to DeMeco Ryans' weight class in the AFC South when it comes to coaching? I think the answer is maybe. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about some stuff that Nick Caserio said yesterday. They got a little bit of moderate attention during the slow news day. The difference between a breakout candidate and a guy that's fighting for their life when training camp begins. And we'll also get into some of the stuff that the people have to say in the chat. But let's just get right into this. Let me ask this question to the peeps. Who's the biggest threat to being best QB in the AFC South? I think even if you're a CJ Stroud skeptic, even if you question how good CJ Stroud is or how good CJ Stroud is going to be, I think it goes without saying that right now he is the best quarterback in the AFC South. So my question would be, who's the biggest threat? And it really comes down to two guys, because I don't think LaFar Jackson, a.k.a. Anthony Richardson, or Daniel Jones are looked at as legitimate threats when it comes to surpassing C.J. Stroud. So it comes down to the question of, do you think Trevor Lawrence, with a new head coach who we'll get to in a second, is a threat? Or do you think that Cam Ward, the least talked about number one overall pick in NFL history, who, let's be honest, wouldn't have even been a top 5 quarterback taken just a year ago, do you think he's the biggest threat to CJ Stroud? I think the answer would be Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence would be the biggest threat. And it's really going to be more dependent on the coach. Do I think Trevor Lawrence, like the days of Trevor Lawrence being the can't miss prospect, the montage when he's drafted of John Elway and Andrew Luck and Troy Aikman, those days have passed. But Trevor Lawrence is probably the biggest threat. Now, that probably makes you not feel very threatened, because we've got a decent sample size of Trevor Lawrence, and he is on his third coach. But I would say the answer to that would be Trevor Lawrence. I think most people would agree, or some may say Cam Ward. Cam Ward gets a lot of local love, so maybe some would say Cam Ward. Who knows? LaFar Jackson. Shout out to Anthony Richardson. Shout out to Austin Jack, HDAV Traveler on the super chat.
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
He says, evening, Landry and friends. Evening to you, my friend. Team player. Unpopular comment, I'm sure, in these chats. He says, the Jags are loaded if Trevor Lawrence can put it together. We'll get to that in a second, because I think it's connected, and it's kind of tied to the head coach situation. Tay says a healthy Anthony Richardson. Oh, that wasn't a joke? I thought you were kidding. My bad. I thought you were kidding. You really think LaFar Jackson healthy? And by the way, there's never been a healthy Anthony Richardson. That didn't happen at Florida. That didn't happen year 1. That didn't happen year 2. I mean, he had 3 different injuries at Florida. That didn't get enough attention, but maybe you're kidding. I'm not sure. Now, the other question I will have about the 2 most important positions, spots in the division, I think quarterback and head coach, we can all agree. Who is more far ahead in the AFC South of their competition and their peers? In other words, do you think, and I think most people would admit at this point, CJ Stroud's the best quarterback. I think even Jags fans and Colts fans, and they come in here and they like to troll a lot, and I think it's great. I think it's great. This is objective Texans coverage from someone who's in the mix. It doesn't hurt my feelings. This is not one of the fan channel. But I think you would even agree Colts fan, Jags fan, Titans fan, that CJ Stroud's the best quarterback in the AFC South. And I would say you'd probably agree that at this point, he's won 2 division titles in 2 years, that DeMeco Ryans is the best head coach in the AFC South up to this point. But I do think this is a more interesting discussion when it comes to the possibility of these guys perhaps testing DeMeco Ryans or being able to maybe climb up and get closer to him than the quarterbacks are to CJ Stroud. Because as much as CJ Stroud has started off well, there's not much faith in Trevor Lawrence. There's faith in Liam Cohen, and these two things can be connected. So they are connected, but I would say when it comes to the quarterbacks, there's reason for skepticism, and there's reason to lean towards skeptical. I think there's reason for optimism when it comes to the coaches in the AFC South. And let's just look at this. And when you're talking about DeMeco, when I'm talking about him as a head coach, I look at his side of the ball and I say the defense has kind of been the straw that stirred the drink last year. I think he does a really good job in his area, and I think he has really good talent to match what he does in his area. But as far as the head coaches and how much of a threat they are, I'm just going to dismiss Callahan. And this could end up being something that makes me look stupid. Callahan in Tennessee, Brian Callahan, I don't think he's a good coach. I don't think that was a good hire. I think it was a weird hire. They fired Mike Vrabel really early. They said they wanted to get out in front of head coaching searches so they could get the top candidate. And then they take a guy that I don't think anyone else was going to hire. Maybe they would interview, but I don't think anyone else was going to hire Brian Callahan. And I don't think he did better than Vrabel last year. And I damn sure don't think they were rebuilding last year. I know that there's like kind of a revisionist history where it's like, well, you know, they felt they weren't tanking. They weren't like the Texans in 2022 when the Texans had $50 million in dead cap and they had traded their franchise quarterback. They broke bread. They paid Snead. Before he got hurt, Snead wasn't looking like he was worth that money. They paid Calvin Ridley. They made Calvin Ridley one of the highest paid receivers in the league. They weren't rebuilding. They signed Tony Pollard. And they ended up being a really bad team. They got worse. And I think the Tennessee Titans fans that I follow in the media, they weren't too impressed with how Brian Callahan was coaching in-game. And I don't think he has a quarterback to bail him out. A quarterback can bail out a mediocre coach. We've seen that many a times. We've seen that in this division. But I don't think Callahan's that guy. So I'm sleeping on him, and I'm dismissing Callahan as someone who's going to be a threat to DeMeco Ryans. I don't think he has the weapons, and I don't think he's a good enough coach. Period, point blank, end of story. He gets a free pass last year because they kind of reset it, and now all of a sudden he has a quarterback, and I think there's a better chance that Callahan is gone 2 years from now. So he's dismissed for me. I think it was a weird hire to begin with. Then we get to 2 other guys that I'm not as down on them as I am when it comes to Callahan. The other 2 coaches in the AFC South, and one of them Shane Steichen. And I think Shane Steichen's still a good coach. Do the wins look great? It hasn't been awesome for him, but I think it's kind of symbolic of what's happened to Indianapolis. They haven't built an awesome roster that is quarterback proof. And ever since Andrew Luck abruptly retired in the preseason of the 2019 season, they've really just been on a mediocre treadmill of either okay or above average. And I think that still continues. I don't think Daniel Jones or LaFar Jackson get you out of that. But I do think Shane Steichen's a good coach. Now, how patient are they going to be with Shane Steichen? Like, is he going to end up being the scapegoat and they just say bye-bye to him? If you look at Shane Steichen's record with Gardner Minshew, he was a drop pass away from winning the AFC South and beating DeMeco in the first year. How much different would we look at Shane Steichen had he won that game? I still think, I don't think you overreact to one result, but how much different would you have looked at it if he would have won a division title with Gardner Minshew? You would perhaps look at it different. Drop pass. prevented that. Last year, just an absolute disaster at the quarterback situation. But the Indianapolis Colts in the regular season, I think they've won 3 less games than the Houston Texans. DeMeco Ryans has had 2 10-win seasons, and Shane Steichen, as the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, he's 9-8 and he's 8-9. So with all the guys that they've had at quarterback, he's won 3 less games. I don't know what more they would expect him to do. Now, again, though, he doesn't necessarily have the quarterback that's going to bail him out. But I think as far as being a good head coach, I think he's a damn good head coach. I don't know what the Daniel Jones things look like. I just know that a couple of years ago, he damn near won a division with Gardner Minshew. I don't know how many coaches could have really done that. So I think Shane Steichen's a good coach. Do I think he's better than DeMeco right now? No. But I do think if you gave Shane Steichen CJ Stroud and you gave him the Texans talent and you gave DeMeco the Colts, then I think perhaps this narrative and this dialogue would be a little bit different because it's obvious it's not cut and dry. And I think all we got to do to accept that, realize that, and discuss that is we go back to the hiring process where DeMeco Ryans, he canceled his interview with the Colts because he wanted to go to the Texans. And some will say, well, he had the connection with the Texans. The Texans also had tons of draft equity, tons of cap space, and they were on the fast track towards being able to build a roster. DeMeco Ryans immediately inherited the 2nd pick, the 12th pick, 2 first-round picks the next year, and an array of draft equity, and the most salary cap space in the league is first 2 years. Like if you look at the combined and you look at how much they'd given up. So Houston was a good situation for DeMeco. DeMeco's done a great job. There's not too many coaches that I think are better equipped to handle this, but it was a better situation. And I think the Texans, I think Steichen was probably their second choice. I have that on pretty good authority, that he was probably their second choice, or the guy that they like the second most. But I still think he's a good coach. Are we going to see that? Don't know. I could easily see him being one of those guys who it doesn't work out in Indianapolis, and then he gets another crack at it, and he ends up doing a hell of a job. I think Shane Steichen's a good coach. I think the organization in Indianapolis has kind of let him down a little bit. For sure. Then we get to one of the more polarizing guys, one of the more viral guys, and that's Liam Cohen with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I think might end up being a pretty damn good head coach. I don't know why, but I'm starting to wonder what the hell this guy has. And I also think that Jacksonville's not your typical top 5 squad team that picked in the top 5. Remember when the Texans picked 2nd and 3rd and they ended up winning the division? Sometimes you just get lucky and you bottom out. Remember when B.O.B. inherited the number 1 overall pick? It ended up being, it was Clowney, and they didn't get the production out of him, but everybody knew, and I know Kubiak had to be the scapegoat. Everybody knew that roster was better than one of the worst teams in the league. I think that's the same case with the Jags. Do I think the Jags are like the favorite to win the division? I don't. I still think it's the Texans. But I also don't know what the hell this guy is as a head coach. I can dismiss Callahan. I never really entertained the possibility of Callahan from the very jump with the Tennessee Titans. Cohen, though, I'm very intrigued to see what he does with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence might not be the chosen one that we thought he was, but Trevor Lawrence is, you can win with Trevor Lawrence. Damn near won 2 straight divisions. They won one a couple years ago and then damn near won another before the meltdown in DeMeco's first year. So I'm intrigued by Cohen. I think DeMeco Ryans has decent competition when it comes to the coaches. I'm intrigued by these coaches minus Callahan. Tony Tate on the chat says the Colts roster is better than the Texans right now. I don't know about that. I don't think you can dismiss having an elite defense. I think there are a lot of uncertainties with the Texans when it comes to the offensive line and the wide receivers and the running back depth. Like, you can basically question everything on offense. Play caller, we don't know what the hell he is. But I'm not dismissive of a super skill like what the Texans defense can be. So if you're going top to bottom and you're just going to like average out like letter grades of every position, maybe you can convince yourself that. But I would not say that just because I think the Texans defense is so good. Cebu says it was a coaching decision to not have the right guy in at running back on that drop pass. True, but he was also hurt. I mean, and he had also kind of worn out the Texans. But yes, you can make the case that they should have had Jonathan Taylor out there. But it was a perfect play call. They just dropped the rock. I have not seen any videos of Travis Hunter running bad routes. I haven't seen these videos. He didn't quite make my timeline. I'll see if there's anything that comes up when this feels like it might be okay. I see what this is. The whiteout crew. Pull up this Travis Hunter. This is what we're talking about. Oh my God, the offseason. Gotta love it. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see with Travis Hunter, whether he can or can't run routes. The caption said, that Travis Hunter can't run routes and Jamar Chase couldn't catch or whatever. Let's check this one out. This is the one that's getting the most run. Okay. So Travis Hunter stinks. Is Travis Hunter going to be terrible? Should he be a corner? That is the question. Thought he looked pretty good at the combine. That might have been as much of a shoe issue. I'm watching his combine stuff here. It looks fine here. Who knows? We'll see what that looks like. They think very highly of him, and they have a pretty damn good wide receiver on the outside. Is AFC champ possible with worst offense, best defense? Worst offense, I mean, it probably has to be somewhat serviceable. If you look at teams like over history who they point to that didn't have very, very good balance on offense versus defense, like eventually you run out of steam. 2017 Jacksonville comes to mind when they ended up losing to New England. Now, some people would say they got screwed over because that was actually an interception by Jack. The Jets, the Rex Ryan years, they eventually ran out of gas. Baltimore, I guess, is the prime example. And then I guess some people will mention Tampa Bay with Brad Johnson. But Brad Johnson and Trent Dilfer, they knew how to lead huddles. But they aren't CJ Stroud. But as far as being like the worst offense, I don't know about that. Like that offense that the Texans had last year, they weren't really going to give you a chance to make a substantial run and win the AFC. You got to be at least somewhat of a serviceable offense, which will be something to keep an eye on. So I guess on June 6th, this is some other news with the Texans. I guess on June 6th, we'll see how Joe Mixon's looking, and maybe we'll get an idea of how he's moving around. Because I guess there's a Joe Mixon pro camp with special guest CJ Stroud, the ultimate youth football camp experience. And I think his best 7, there's going to be like some sort of draft, are going to take on CJ's best 7. So a little bit of competition, and Joe Mixon is a competitive dude. So we'll see what that looks like with Joe Mixon, because we've heard that he's been a little bit banged up. It's something, but not serious, was what the comment was from Aaron Wilson. But we'll see if he's in a boot. We'll see what that looks like. Tony Tate says, do you truly believe your OL is fixed? What are you asking? Are you asking if the Texans' offensive line is fixed? I don't think anyone thinks that. Now, Nick Caserio says that they're not worried about it, but I don't think anyone really thinks that the offensive line is fixed without seeing anything going on with offseason stuff. I don't know that anyone thinks that or anyone has said that. On the super chat,
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
Gavin King says, what's up? This is off topic, but yesterday during the playoff convo, you brought up reseeding. I'm curious how that would work. Like if the 7th seed beats the 2, they become the 2. Nah, so I'll just pull up a playoff bracket and explain. We'll just go 2024 playoff bracket, and we'll just pull this up here. All right, so we'll pull this up. We'll share it. All right, so you can kind of see this bracket here. Basically, there's 2 things that they're arguing about when it comes to the bracket. So they're arguing about an 11-win Chargers team. If you look up here on the top right, they're arguing about an 11-win Chargers team having to go on the road to Houston, a team that's won 10 games, and they get to be the home team because of the winning the division. Because the division winner is automatically the home team. More specifically, I think the outrage is that Minnesota won a couple more games than the Rams. And Minnesota, actually, it came down to the end of the season against the Lions, who ended up being the 1 seed. And because Minnesota lost, they end up being the 5 seed, despite the fact they have a better record. And they go to the Rams and lose. So both teams that had better records, they go on the road and they end up losing. And that often happens. The number one example is typically like Seattle with the beast mode run against the Saints. The Saints had won like 4 more games, but they still had to go on the road. So that's one thing they're arguing. The other thing that they're arguing is that, like, let's say that in the playoffs, the 7 seed Packers upset the Eagles. So Green Bay upsets the Eagles. In this current format, Green Bay would play either Washington or Tampa Bay, and it would stay the same. So if, say, Washington pulls off the upset, the 6 seed, then they're getting to face the 7 seed, while meanwhile Detroit's facing the 4 or 5. What they want to happen is if the 7 seed wins, then the 1 seed, they reseed it, and the 1 seed still faces the 7. Like if Denver beat Buffalo, then Baltimore, assuming that they beat Pittsburgh, they would face Denver, and then Kansas City would have to face the Texans or Chiefs, who are higher seeds. So they're just saying that you should have to reseed if there's like upsets, and it would specifically fall on the 2-7, like if a 7 pulls off an upset, which I think is fair. I understand the division title argument, and I can understand both sides of that, but I think that's fair to reseed in the playoffs, especially if a team earns the right to have a bye. Now all of a sudden they're having to face the 4 or 5, and the 7 seed is either facing the 3 or 6. So I think that is a fair thing. Now the problem is I don't know that they're separating these two things with the voting. It doesn't sound like they are. So I think the desire to keep the divisions relevant is probably going to outweigh any of the reseeding things. Who knows though? Sometimes they reword it to where they allow it to pass a little bit more. And if you read between the lines and you listen to all these people who are saying things and kind of setting stuff up, it seems like they've kind of changed the wording to where they may eliminate the tush push. It does kind of feel like that may be the case. Jorge Flores says, hit that Nick sound. You the goat of thinking of clever ways to use sounds. Nick. It's my thing, man. I've always done it. I let the board op take credit. Like I would create drops and then just let the board op take the credit when I was in radio. But that's always been kind of my thing. Reseeding does make perfect sense. I'm not sure why the NFL hasn't adopted it yet. Yeah, I think it's effed up. Like just and sometimes like it takes, and I know this is mainly Texans fans in here, but like it takes you actually being impacted by it for it to actually hit. But that's why I think when you're talking about these rule things, I think it's much more healthy to just look at it from what's fair and what's not. And like, let's say the Texans have an awesome regular season. Let's say it's just an incredible regular season. And let's say they outduel the Chiefs for home field advantage. Baltimore, Kansas City, whatever, they hold them both off. And the Texans win like 12, 13 games. This is hypothetical, but I'm trying to kind of localize and feel the pain. Okay, so the Texans are the 1 seed. They have a bye. Let's say that Baltimore gets upset by, I don't know, pick a team, Indianapolis. Let's say Indianapolis as the 7 seed pulls off an upset of the 2 seeded Baltimore Ravens, and they advance. And Kansas City is the 3 seed and they advance. That would mean that Kansas City in the current format would face the 7 seed, and the Texans would have to face the winner of the 4 or 5 seed. And typically the 5 seed is the second best team in a division that's really good. That's why the 5 seed is so dangerous at this point, because it's the Chargers who couldn't hurdle the Chiefs, and it's the Vikings who couldn't hurdle the Lions. So you're facing that, or you're facing a division winner. And I mean, that would suck. You do all that work, you get the 1 seed, and then all of a sudden in the second round, you got to face a really good squad. And I guess it's kind of a break for the team that didn't get it to have an easier game, assuming that they win theirs. So that's kind of what they're thinking on that rule. DeMeco Ryans versus other AFC South head coaches. We've gotten into that. Now I want to talk about bounce back candidates versus survival candidates. And I think there's kind of a difference. So I keep hearing Dameon Pierce's name mentioned, and I know DeMeco Ryans likes him, but it's talked about like a bounce back year. Is it really a bounce back year after 2 straight down years. I guess it can technically be, but isn't Dameon Pierce kind of one of those guys that's just going to be fighting for his NFL life this year? If Dameon Pierce has a bad year, he's going to be on 1-year contracts for like the rest of his career. It feels like that's a possibility. I'll never say never. But if Dameon Pierce doesn't have a good year this year, then he's one of those guys who's just going to be, okay, this year, oh, look at the running back market. Dameon Pierce, okay. So he kind of feels like a guy who's surviving. To me, a bounce back candidate is someone like Christian Harris, who didn't really necessarily have a terrible year, but there were high expectations last year. And I think those have kind of been minimized just because of the injuries. So I think he's kind of a bounce back candidate, Christian Harris. Titus Howard is trying to survive in the NFL. Damn sure on the Texans. Now they've pushed back the contract to where I think he's almost not cuttable. I don't know that that's the case next year. I haven't really dug into that, but if Titus Howard doesn't establish himself as a starter on this offensive line, likely at guard, then he's not a part of the future plans. And furthermore, if you can't do that on this offensive line, I don't know how many offensive lines you're going to fit into if you can't do it here. Now, maybe the coaching isn't worth a damn, and that's another issue on itself. Maybe you haven't made the right move with Kaylee, and maybe you're just kind of in a no man's land. But I would say Titus Howard, Dameon Pierce, they're fighting to survive. Bounce back candidate, Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz is not fighting for his NFL life. Dalton Schultz is going to get picked up as long as he wants to get picked up. There's a shortage of tight ends. And you can find ways to use Dalton Schultz. You can find you just don't ask him to block. But the contract that he has right now, he's not, no matter what happens, he's not playing under that 3rd season. The Texans aren't bringing him back in this current contract under any circumstance, any realistic circumstance with Dalton Schultz. But I do think it's possible, and I think it's more possible for Dalton Schultz than the guys that we mentioned before outside of Christian Harris, that we see a much more productive version of Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz is still a useful player. I know he drives people effing nuts in the chat. He is one of the most despised players. He disgusts people that watch him play, and rightfully so. He was terrible last year. But I could easily see Dalton Schultz bouncing back. I think we definitely see a better version of Dalton Schultz this year. And I think that's kind of a bounce back. There's no scenario where Dalton Schultz gets cut. I don't think there's any scenario where Christian Harris gets cut. There's scenarios where we could see Dameon Pierce cut. Titus Howard doesn't get cut, but if he doesn't have a good year and he doesn't establish himself, it's not a long-term type of thing. So he's trying to survive. So I think there's a little bit of a difference between the bounce back and the trying to survive. And Dalton Schultz has already had a good career for himself. But we'll see what Dalton Schultz does. Brandon says it's a hot take. This year's offensive line is deeper than last year. That offensive line wasn't deep last year at all. So I don't know what deep is. Is that like saying versatility? Is that like another like different way of kind of saying versatility? I mean, yeah, they got more guys, they got more possibilities. But deep, I mean, is that good? Don't really know about that. Sean says, I thought Christian Harris was not hitting the field due to fitness until I rewatched the Baltimore game. He had a wretched game. Can't tell if it was rustiness or him just losing it. Like, he was hurt last year. I mean, he was effed up. They didn't want to say it. They were being kind of weird about it. Quite frankly, I think they did him a disservice. I think DeMeco Ryans, it was the Dave Chappelle keeping it real goes wrong, where you're trying to protect the player and essentially you're kind of leaving him out to dry because you know he's not playing for a long time. What's wrong with saying we're not going to see Christian for a while? Day to day, he was day to day for 2 months. And DeMeco had multiple opportunities to kind of do that. That was an example of keeping it real gone wrong. And I thought there was a little bit of a disservice. And that they tried to get him back. And quite frankly, I think they liked the way that Henry To'oTo'o was playing. And I don't know if it was a confidence thing. I don't know if it was a fitness thing or what. but I don't think Christian Harris has lost it. I don't think he ever really had a chance to get ready last season. I mean, he was at camp. He stretched one time after being on the side, and then all of a sudden he's back on the sideline, and then all of a sudden he's like in a boot and he's injured. And they don't want to just come out and say how hurt he was. We told you here. Me and Cody told you Christian Harris is not coming back anytime soon. But I would not dismiss the possibility of Christian Harris being a good football player. It will be interesting to see what they think of him, assuming that he can stay healthy. It's a hell of an assumption. What they think of him if he's healthy, and Henry To'o, because they liked what he did last year, but I don't think his upside's as high as Christian Harris. And quite frankly, I think it's a nice platoon. I know that's a baseball term, but that's a nice platoon. So who knows what that is? Mike says he just finished some work on the Harley. That is a very manly thing, my friend. The Harley. Beast mode right there. Take pride in that, for sure. The Dalton Schultz thing, keep an eye on it. I know he was very, very complimentary of Bobby Slowick when we had him on the radio, and he talked about how great he was and he loved him, and then all of a sudden, Bobby damn near turned him into a left tackle. So I don't know if Dalton Schultz got a little bit frustrated or what, but this year he's going to have to figure something out. I'm intrigued to see what Dalton's whole vibe is this year. Dalton's an interesting guy. He hates media. I think he's kind of scarred from the Dallas experience. And now he just kind of goes about his business here and does whatever. But seems to be someone that CJ respects, and they were trying so hard last year to talk about how valuable he was. It was kind of a beatdown. Now, it wasn't as much of a beatdown because with the offensive line, they were doing it with Kenyon Green and Titus and all them. So it wasn't as much, but man, it was a beatdown. The way that they would talk about Dalton Schultz. He's valuable. He really helps us. And, in the huddle, it's like, man, he's playing terrible. He's playing terrible. And Bobby Slowick and all these coaches and players just want to,
damn it, Bobby.
They just want to keep talking about and singing the praises of Dalton Schultz and how great he was playing, even though your eyes told you and you could see that he wasn't playing good. Tony says, I'm a Colt fan, Locker, but love your show. Legit love it. Hey, shout out to the Colts, man. This is if you want the pulse of what's going on and all that, this is the place to come through. Be interesting to see what the Colts do. Feels like Daniel Jones is going to be the QB. Just doesn't seem like a real competition. But yeah, this is a little bit too much from however the hell you say your name. Noel is Amon-Ra St. Brown 2.0. I mean, that would be awesome if he was. If he was, then it would actually be kind of a full circle moment if the Texans got Amon-Ra St. Brown by luck, because that was not their original plan. They tried to trade up to 38, and Noel just kind of ended up falling in their lap, and they ended up making that work despite having other guys that play in the slot, although he says he can play other places. But it would kind of be full circle because Nico Collins is one of the guys that Amon-Ra St. Brown can mention off the top of the dome when it comes to the receivers selected ahead of him. And the Nico Collins one doesn't look as bad. It did a couple of years ago, but it doesn't look bad as it did. But Amon-Ra St. Brown can recite it. Yeah, here you go. Yeah, he says it. Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Monte Smith, Kadarius Toney, ouch. Rashad Bateman, ouch. Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, ouch. Dwayne Estridge, Terrace Marshall. Josh Palmer. Brown, USC. And then Nico Collins. So a lot of guys. Nico doesn't look as bad though. But yeah, if he's Amon-Ra St. Brown 2.0, then we'll be singing the praises of Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans and talking about how genius they are. I thought old Nick's comments were interesting. We talked about it on SNL, but Nick Caserio saying, if me and DeMeco aren't worried about it, you shouldn't be worried about it. And it was a question asked about CJ Stroud running for his life and them not investing early draft equity in offensive linemen. And it turned into Nick Caserio talking about the same stuff, cohesiveness on the offensive line and all that. But the end of it, he said, if DeMeco and me aren't worried about it, you shouldn't be either. What the hell does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, if you are not worried about it, then I'm even more worried about it. Like, whatever Nick Caserio's mindset is when it comes to offensive line, it's mine is the opposite. Why would you trust him on that? So I don't know what he's saying. And a lot of times you don't judge him by what they're saying, but any way Nick Caserio feels about offensive line, you feel the opposite. That's why I asked Nick Caserio about their problem with the offensive line. And I thought that answer was a little bit funny too. And Caserio essentially said, no, we're not worried about the offensive line. We haven't really made any changes on the offensive line. And I don't know if it's just a sensitive subject. I don't know, but it's kind of wild that Nick Caserio, said they didn't need to make any wholesale changes when they did. And then if me and DeMeco aren't worried about it, then you shouldn't be. Yeah, you should be. If you've watched the Texans and you've watched Nick Caserio with offensive line, you should definitely be worried about that. And that's all the more reason to be. So I don't know what the hell he's trying to say there. Arthur on the chat asked, do you think Jimmy Ward is a lock to make the roster? Look, I've talked about this in the offseason. If Jimmy Ward is your super, and I asked DeMeco about it, and you can see it on the shorts section. We only use unique shorts here. Either a question I ask at the press conference or some unique content. We don't just piggyback shorts to try to pad stats, unique stuff. But I asked Jimmy Ward, I asked DeMeco about Jimmy Ward. He said he's a great football player. Love for Jimmy Ward to be a part of this team. And I mean, they've already paid pretty much for Jimmy Ward. There's not like some sort of massive savings if you get rid of him. And I think a guy that's got experience playing that well in the nickel and as a good backup safety, you can do a lot worse than Jimmy Ward. And DeMeco Ryans and Jimmy Ward have a history together, like a deep history. Their football lives and the different ups and downs and growths and all that. It's got multiple destinations. It's got multiple positions, both from the player's point of view and the coach's point of view. 3 different each at least. And if it's already been paid for, then why the hell not have Jimmy Ward here as like a super reserve safety, especially if he's willing to do that? I asked DeMeco Ryans about that at the Texans golf outing. This is what he said about Jimmy Ward to kind of add some more clarity to your question.
Jimmy's doing fine. Jimmy's on the road to recovery as well. He's doing fine. He's out of his boot now. He's starting to get back into running a little bit, so he's in a good spot. And Jimmy is a great football player. I love Jimmy. I love how he plays the game. And again, same whenever Jimmy is ready. I know Jimmy can help our football team win games. We saw him make game-changing plays for us, big-time plays and big moments. And whenever he's out there, he'll do it. He's a football player. So what I love about him, he's played multiple spots in the defense. So I'm excited to see just whenever he's ready, it doesn't hurt to have a lot of good safeties on your team.
So that's kind of a change there. So he's talking about multiple spots. And when Jimmy first got here, it was, I want to be a safety. I don't want to have to play nickel full time. I want to be a safety. And they brought him in. They honored that promise. They gave him an extension when probably wasn't the smartest financial thing to do. And then he went back to nickel, and he actually played really damn well there after Jalen Petrie went out. I mean, the second he went out, he had the pick six. So, yeah, I mean, cutting Jimmy Ward to me just really doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if he's willing to take on that role based on what you got and the amount of depth and the creativity that DeMeco Ryans has in getting guys involved on defense, whether it's, for all the skepticism about offense, like on defense, like if he needs to find a way to use Jalen Petrie, he finds a way to use Jalen Petrie. I think that's kind of going to be a normal role. He's doing it with Reed now. I think we kind of saw him practicing that way in rookie minicamp, and then he's done it with Jimmy Ward. If he's got to find a way to use multiple pass rushers, he can do it. He can get production out of multiple pass rushers. Linebackers, he really hasn't had an opportunity in like a heavy arsenal of those guys, but this year he'll probably have a little bit more than he did last year. So if he has Jimmy Ward at his disposal, I don't see any reason why not to have Jimmy Ward on the squad. Knuckles says, what are the odds Caserio is the Easterby spawn doing just enough to keep us glued, but not enough to push us over the hump? LMAO contracts online. I mean, I know you're kind of kidding. Just enough to keep us glued, but not enough to push us over the hump. He's not good at negotiating contracts. He's not good at O-line. I will agree with that. He does have some weaknesses. Those are going to be very costly moving forward. Caserio's been playing on a different playing field, and his weaknesses, while they've been able to be overcome as of late in the new layout of things and the new bills that are going to be due, and really just the overall cost of continuing to surround a quarterback with unfavorable situations, he's going to have to be better. He's going to have to be better because those mistakes will be a lot more costly down the stretch. He won't admit he was wrong when it comes to the offensive line. It's that simple. I don't think he's got to go up there and like confess his sins or some sort of heart or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, he's weirdly stubborn, and he weirdly talks out of both ends when he talks about the offensive line, and he's just not good at it. He hasn't been good at it. How likely is Noel outplaying Captain Kirk?
Captain Kirk, can you save me? Captain Kirk, I want to have your baby.
I wouldn't bet on that right off the top. I think Christian Kirk's still a good player, but we'll see. We'll see what Noel's got. I think he is going to be good. Arthur says, I think Nick's way of Nick saying you shouldn't worry about it is his way of saying stop asking about it. I guess. Sure, I guess. It was fans. It was a funny delivered question for sure. Todd the Show says giving Stroud more control might be a disaster. Follows it up with he's never done it. I look, I don't know whether it's a disaster or not, but I do think it's interesting when the conversation comes up where it's almost brought up as if it's like a foregone conclusion that someone going to the line of scrimmage and being able to check means that things automatically go better. But if you look at the San Francisco system Brock Purdy's not checking at the line of scrimmage. He just got broke off. The surroundings aren't ideal, but I do agree with you. I mean, I don't know if it's a disaster, but I think it's weird to assume if we've never really seen it, and you are correct about that. The Ohio State offense basically writes itself. And doing this, he had a lot of success in year one and then not in year two. Like, just assuming that him getting more freedom at the line of scrimmage is a good thing, I think that's dangerous. I mean, a lot of times, some offenses, the old New England offense that they ran with King Bill, it was like taking a test before you went to the line of scrimmage. It kind of sucked. And you always used to remember they would snap the ball late in the count and the defense would be able to time out their rush and all that. But I don't know if it's a disaster. I don't think it's a disaster, but it is interesting when it's just presented as, oh, CJ Stroud needs freedom at the line of scrimmage. Okay. I feel like it's kind of a skill, right? Like, let's see what the skill looks like and how it goes. And I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. I'm assuming there's going to be a little bit more, but we don't know for certain that that's going to be a good thing. So, yeah, I agree. Sean says there is a time when everyone has never done something. It's the next logical step. I agree with that in the terms of the first-time play caller. I kind of rolled my eyes at the notion that they need an experienced play caller. Usually if play callers are looking for work, it's because they failed at their last job. And there is one stat that is 100%. This is a 100% stat. There's nothing out, like, there's exceptions for everything. There is no exception for this stat. Every play caller in the history of the NFL at some point was a first-time play caller. All of them. Every single one of them. Now, I don't know if every quarterback has a lot of freedom at the line of scrimmage. I'm sure some quarterbacks have good careers without having that. So when you talk about it in those terms, like Sean is, I get what you're saying. You got to see him do it before you completely say it's going to be a disaster. I agree with that. But we still don't know if it's going to be a good thing or not. Which is something to check out. If he never done it, when is he going to do it? He's going to do it this year. Sideline Sarah says he said he had more responsibility at the line of scrimmage in college. I would love to know how much responsibility, because that was one of the criticisms of Ohio State's offense. Maybe more, but how much? It's definitely going to be more here. I don't know how much freedom you have in Ohio State's offense. It was pretty criticized offense at Ohio State. Maybe it's increased. Who knows? It damn sure better not be what the New England one was here. There, the ghost of Mike McCarthy. My God. He says Brady and Peyton spoiled us fans, as we now want our QBs to be able to break down every defensive look once they step to the line. Takes a lot of film study and prep to get to that point. Well, it's also one of one in both instances, like very unique. So, yeah, I don't I don't think people expect CJ to go up there and be Tom Brady or Peyton Manning at the line of scrimmage, but it is. I think it's a dangerous assumption to just assume that he's automatically going to be good at it just because he gets the freedom to do it. So I would agree with that. Just the assumption is a little bit much. But we're about to get to minicamp, so maybe we'll get a look at what's going on with CJ Stroud. We haven't heard from him. I know the rookies said they briefly kind of touched on. We haven't heard from him. He's been laying low, relaxing. He's definitely getting a little more relaxation in this offseason. So we'll see how he figures it out. I'm assuming that he has a little bit of a grasp of the offense. They've given him something in that way, but we'll see. Arthur says, I wish we still had Keenum or any vet in the QB room for help and stuff like that. What? Davis Mills is smart, man. Davis Mills is really smart. Now, he doesn't have the experience of Case Keenum. He's not the savvy vet that Case Keenum is. Davis Mills is a smart guy, though. And like, if you watched, I think Chase Daniel broke it down the other day, just how much film study he used to do and like what his schedule was. And a lot of his film study, I mean, he was a backup quarterback the majority of his time. A lot of times when he was film study, it was for the starting quarterback. You would always see him on the sidelines with Breeze. And before Breeze even got there, like Daniel would be talking to him almost like he was a coach. You see that with a lot of like long time backup quarterbacks, which is what I think Davis Mills ends up being. But you know, the vet, like Davis Mills is a vet at this point. Davis Mills is heading into year 5, right? God dang, time flies. Yeah, Davis Mills is heading into year 5, right? Yes. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, year 5. So that's kind of what Davis Mills is. Like Davis Mills isn't a threat to beat out CJ Stroud. Davis Mills is pretty much that type of resource for him. So you have that. It's not Case Keenum, but you definitely got that. And I think Case ends up being a coach. I just don't know where or what. I think he's going to play till his arm falls off, and then he'll end up being a coach somewhere. Maybe he comes back to Houston and tries to figure something out here. But yeah, I think Case will be back in some way. I don't know. They wouldn't do like a corny retire as a Texan, would they? I wouldn't put it past them. They're pretty corny. But he's definitely going to be a coach. There's zero doubt about that. It's kind of what Case Keenum was put on this earth to do. He ain't doing nothing outside of football. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Breakout Stars versus Survival. CJ and DeMeco Ryans. Who are their threats? Slow-ish time we're about to get through. And then it's going to be real fun around here. Appreciate y'all for coming through. Subscribe, like, right along. Always remember when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Appreciate the participation in the chat. Talk to you on SNL tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
Won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not too plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways. If it's up, then it's up. We number 1. You don't need to try your luck.